Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This video is about how long it takes to learn a language and how much we should study. So of course we always want to see instant results when we're doing anything. But unfortunately in language learning, well with languages there's a lot to learn. There's pronunciation, there's the grammar rules, there's all the words, there's all the phrases, there's which phrases to use in which situations, there's a lot to learn. So it will take some time. The main reason is your brain needs to make new connections and needs to get used to all these new things. Also with the way our memory works, we can't remember everything. For example, you will learn a word multiple times and then completely forget it. So there are some estimates to how long it takes for English speakers, and these come from the Foreign Language Institute, which is a US organization that offers foreign language services. But these are rough estimates based on how long it takes to pass a test. So they say that languages close to English like French, Italian, Spanish, Swedish and so on will take about 600 hours of classroom time. Then they say German will take about 750 hours because it's slightly more complicated. Next we have the languages which are not very similar to English but aren't too complicated. These are languages like Swahili and Malaysian, which they say will take about 900 hours. Then we have the languages with many differences and many complications, such as Russian, Greek, Hindi, Turkish, and they say this will take about 1100 hours. And finally, the hardest listed are Arabic, Cantonese and Mandarin, Japanese and Korean, and they say this will take about 2200 hours. I'm not sure how reliable these numbers are because some of these languages are harder than others. For example, I would say Korean is way easier than Chinese just because of the writing system, so it's a rough estimate, I think. Also, this is only for English speakers, so if you're coming from any other language it will be completely irrelevant, I think. So for comparison, I'll just explain how long it took me to learn the languages I know. So I don't know how many hours I spent, because I never counted, but I know the time in months. So for Russian it took me about 6 to 7 months to start speaking and understanding people, and it took me about maybe 10 months to a year to speak at a good level. So at some points when I was learning Russian I was practicing maybe 4 to 5 hours a day. I'm not exactly sure why. I just became kind of obsessed with it, and I would read, listen to things almost like half the day. So with Italian it took me about 5 months to start speaking and understanding people, to start having conversations. I didn't study it as much as Russian, not as obsessively, and it was maybe 2 to 3 hours a day. It took me less time, I think, because Italian is slightly easier. Still has complications, but it's slightly easier than Russian. I also had experience and knew the best way for me to learn languages, so I used that method, which took less time. Whereas in Russian I was experimenting, trying out new things, so I wasted a bit of time in that. It took me maybe about 8 months in Italian to speak at a decent level. And Spanish I don't speak very well yet, but it was probably the language I started to try and speak the earliest, maybe after about 3 or 4 months. But I think this is because it's very similar to Italian, so the progress was very fast. So how long it will take depends on, I guess, 3 factors. One is how similar is the language to languages you already know, because the more you already know, the less you need to learn. Number 2 is how much you study, and number 3 is how complicated the language is, which normally means some kind of irregular rule that you need to memorize that takes a long time. So what I've talked about here is just getting to a good level where you can understand and start speaking. To get to a native level would take many years and lots of experience, so don't expect to do that very quickly. But how much should you study? Well, of course the more the better, but it's hard for most people to study for many hours a day. But what I recommend to do is try to do at least an hour a day. When I studied languages at school, I studied for maybe like 2 hours a week, which is nowhere near enough. because it's just not often enough, and you can't learn too much in 2 hours. And also, it wasn't the best studying technique, because, for example, I never listened to anything in those lessons. It was all just exercises. I think that makes it easier for me is to try to make it as interesting as possible, because learning languages can be frustrating. You will forget things, you won't learn as fast as you think you should, you will spend long times not understanding what people are saying and get frustrated. So the more interesting you make it, the better it will be. For example, if you like reading books, try reading books in that language. If you like reading the news, try doing that in that language. If you like listening to the radio, try that. Just try to include the things you like when you're studying. Then it will just make it easier, and it means that I try not to focus on the language particularly. I try to use the language to understand something else that I like, and that keeps me motivated, because if you actually like what you're listening to, you will pay attention more. But that's all for this video. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll see you next video.